Hi, and welcome to the Genealogy Radio Show. This is the radio show that's keeping you in a loop. Live from RCB, from beautiful Kilkee, and this will be replayed on a Sunday and on a podcast afterwards. Today, we will be talking about Griffiths Valuation. Eve, could you explain to us what exactly the Griffiths valuations are and why and how they were conducted?
Absolutely. So Griffiths valuation was the primary valuation of Ireland, and it was carried out between 1848 and 1864. And it basically determined people's liability to pay the poor rate for the support of the poor and destitute within each poor law union. So it provides detailed information on where people lived in mid-19th century Ireland and the property that they possessed. The valuation was arranged by county, barony, poor law union, civil parish, and townland. So it was carried out in 3 different stages. Originally, the plan was to valuate all properties, but the project was much too big. So the first phase only included land and property over the value of £3. In the second phase, it was changed to £5. After this, in the third phase, they reverted back to their original idea of the valuation of all properties. Griffiths Valuation is one of Ireland's most important genealogy resources, as it's known as a census substitute. It contains information on about 1 million people who lived in Ireland between 1848 and 1864. Sir Richard Griffith ordered Griffiths Valuation to give a basis for taxation. So this entails calculating the rental rate for each unit of property by determining the value of all privately owned lands and structures in rural and urban locations. The study's original volumes are kept at the National Archives in Dublin and the Public Record Office in Belfast. So it's known as a census substitute because no census material from the 19th century has survived. So Griffiths Valuation is an excellent resource for family historians with Irish relatives and people who are interested in genealogy. It was a census substitute for the years before, during, and after the Great Famine because it's the sole detailed guide to where people resided in Ireland for the mid-19th century and what property that they owned or rented.
Thank you, Eve. Chloe, could you tell us what information the valuation contained and how it was catalogued?
Certainly, Jack. This document itself provides, as Eve said, the detailed information regarding where people live, the property they possess, and the amount they have to pay to live on the land. Documents showcase the size of the land each person has and the net annual value for the land, the building built on the land, and the total net worth of both the land and buildings built in separate columns. Each civil parish within a barony or poor law union would be added up separately, with townlands acting as subdivisions. Total net worth of the entire parish would then be added together for a total rateable property price, with exemptions such as police barracks, graveyards, and other stuff that are provided by the British government being subtracted from the total to get only housing. The currency at this time was different than it is nowadays, with pounds, shillings, and pences. There would be 20 shillings within a pound, 12 pences within a shilling, and 240 pences within a pound. The document lists the occupiers of land with a separate columns depicting who they are paying their rent to. So labourers and tenants will be paying their landlords, and landlords will be paying towards the government, as well as a description used on what the land is used for by each occupant. As part of the validation, the location for each housing would be cross-referenced with the Ordnance Survey of Ireland map, which began in 1824 as a way to map out Ireland for taxation purposes originally. This could be seen in one of the columns, the very first column on the left, noted as numbers and letters. There'll be names going down the columns beside this, but they won't mean that they are neighbours. It's only the way the validator would list each holding in his manuscript book. The numbers and letters would indicate a certain household. Numbers would indicate the lot number, which will be outlined in a single area in an Ordnance Survey map, which will then be labeled with the same number. The capital letter would be subdivision within the lot. It indicates separate parcels of property held by the same person. And the same capital letter can appear more than once if they are leasing their land towards cottagers, laborers, and tenants when indicated. Lowercase signifies single properties held in common by a number of listed occupiers. This is more common in rural areas such as the west of Ireland, where up to 20 families farm on the same common area within, let's say, 5 acres. There'll be 20 families within the same area. And then there's a lowercase in italics, which are built structures on the land. Line orders for these buildings are important. So the main farmers or the main occupiers of the land will be labeled A, while cottagers, laborers, and tenants will be labeled from B, C, D, and so on.
Thank you, Chloe. Sarah, could you tell us more about the valuers and what their data contains?
Of course. Well, when the Townland Valuation Act was passed in 1826, a survey and assessment of all Ireland's properties and estates was prompted. This early survey was never actually printed, but the surviving records are in manuscript form as field or house books, otherwise known as the valuation books. The valuers that wrote these were mainly concerned with agricultural land. They traveled from parish to parish, describing the land and its surroundings in their notebooks and recording and noting the soil quality. However, details from these notebooks were not included in Griffiths' primary valuation of tenements when it was originally published. Now, these valuation books were arranged by the parish, and there are 6 different types of valuers' notebooks used during the valuation period, used for different purposes and held different types of information. The first type of book I'm going to talk about are called field books. They recorded information about the size of the land and the quality of the soil in each individual's properties. If you're lucky, you might find the head of the household's name recorded also. These books were used to gather details between 1830 and the early 1860s. The National Archives hold these books for the Republic and some of the books for Northern Ireland, and the Public Record Office holds most of the books for Northern Ireland counties. Now, house books were compiled between 1830 to around 1844 and often include the occupier's name. These books also record details of living conditions, not just in terms of space, but also the materials used for walls and roofs, and sometimes occasionally outbuildings. Some notebooks even include sketches of the property, barns, and outbuildings to help get a better understanding of how the land was formatted. The National Archives also holds these books for the Republic and some of the books for Northern Ireland, and the Public Record Office holds most of the books for Northern Ireland. Now, tenure books recorded the legal basis of the property or land holding, as well as the starting date of the lease and the annual rent paid. Now, these only started in 1844. And rent books worked in similar fashion and recorded the rents paid. The information from both tenure and rent books were used directly as an aid to the actual valuation process of land and properties. Quarto books covered small and medium-sized towns from 1844, and the National Archives collection of these have been digitized for easier public access. Now, the last type of valuer notebook was called a perambulation book, which recorded the visits made by the valuers from late 1844 to the early 1860s, according to area. These notebooks always predate the published version of Griffiths Valuation. Since all these different types of notebooks hold such different information, they can be helpful to researchers by pointing them in the right direction of other official surveys or records from that time that act as a census substitute.
Thank you, Sarah. Victor, could you tell us more about Sir Richard Griffith and who he was?
Yeah, so Sir Richard Griffith and who he was. He was born in 1784 on the 20th of September and sometimes he's known as the father of Irish geology. So he was born in Hume Street in Dublin, and he is the son of Richard Griffith, MP of Millicent House, and his father was a politician who served as a member of Parliament for Askeaton in Limerick until 1790 in the Irish House of Commons. So Richard John Griffith served in the Royal Irish Artillery in 1799, and then he retired. He married Maria Jane on the 21st of September, 1812, so a day after his birthday. He then spent time studying in London and Edinburgh, and he was then elected to the Royal Society of Edinburgh at 23. His works even included things like road building, relief programs for the famine, and his geological map of Ireland in 1835. So when he began valuing land in Scotland, where he spent 2 years, 1806 and 1807 inclusive. And he was valuing land in Scotland through the examination of soils. He used the Scotch system of valuation, and he used a modified version of this when he became Commissioner of Valuation and began his project in Ireland. So in 1809, his first public appointment was by the Dublin Society, and it was to gather knowledge amongst other engineers into the nature and extent of the bogs in Ireland. And in 1812, he done such a good job that he was appointed mining engineer and professor of geology to the Royal Dublin Society. So in 1822, he became engineer of public works in Cork, Kerry, and Limerick, and up until 1830 was occupied repairing old roads and creating new roads in previously inaccessible part of the countries. During this period, he built some 243 miles of road and erected 18 bridges, arguably one of his finest being that of the 5 Arches Bridges in Listowel, County Kerry, which spans over the River Feel. I found this especially interesting as I myself am from Kerry and I had not known that he built this. So just goes to show really how much work he had done and how much we take for granted how much he'd actually done. So yeah, he was commissioned by the British government in 1825 to carry out a boundary survey of Ireland. He then began his work, which would later become known as the Griffiths Valuations. So yeah, in 1828, he was succeeded by Sir John Ball Green, who began doing annual revisions of these valuations to keep them as accurate as possible. This is because Sir Richard Griffith had finished the valuations in 1865 before being succeeded. So mostly Green just did revisions as Griffith had actually finished them. And in 1854, he was awarded the Wolstone Medal in recognition of his magnificent work and other scientific achievements. And in 1858, he was promoted to baronet. On the 22nd of September, 2 days after his birthday in 1878, he passed away. I'm just going to read a quote here that just kind of sums up what brilliance he did. So in the words of his biographer, it said, "There is hardly a work of public importance undertaken in Ireland, including the improvement of the navigation of the Shannon, the sanitation of the Royal Barracks in Dublin, and the erection of the National Gallery and the Museum of Natural History, in which he was not consulted or which he did not personally superintend." So that quote just really goes to show his brilliance and how much of an impact he had on the advancement of geology. So yeah, that's a little bit of information on Sir Richard Griffiths.
Thank you, Victor. If you would like to see it online, Griffiths Valuation can be accessed online for free at www.askaboutireland.ie/Griffith-valuation/. There you can search by name, county, barony, and old like way of land units. Originally supposed to be Norman. It's no longer used, but like if you know somewhere you can do that. Same with Union, which was kind of like meant to replace it, but it's also there, but again, no longer used. Or parish, which is less about what church it kind of went. It was more of a civil sort of around the area. So it does require a surname to begin searching, but this can be circumvented by using common Irish surnames like Byrne or O'Connor. For example, I use Byrne. And from there, you can see a lot, and you can like look for a county if you're not looking for a specific person. From there, you can see scans of the original document. And then with these documents, you can just kind of like see stuff like their names, their landlord names, and details that were all talked about earlier that's kept in the documents. So this Griffiths valuation can be accessed on other sites, such as Ancestry and Find My Past, but these require a subscription to access. So Ask About Ireland is the most easy, and kind of, since it's free, it's just easier to use and does not require monetary thing. So just to end it off, a little bit on why Griffiths valuation. Griffiths valuation is like an alternative to a census. It's not a census, but it can be used. It's a valuable source that can be used. You just to look back in the past, look for specific people. It's important for genealogy, and it's also important for history. For example, in history, is interesting to know of why property valuations are done, especially like commissions by the British. And that's where it goes into wondering, because of Ireland's military importance, is that a connection between where they want to use, have knowledge about what's the property where people are living in Ireland? It's just an interesting thing to note. Thank you for listening today. We hope that you've learned something new, and we hope that you'll tune in another day. Again, it will be replayed on Sunday, and it will also be on the podcast on our site. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for such a fascinating show today. We've got a few minutes, so I'm going to come in and just say that has brought many new facts to me for Griffiths valuation, showing that we're always learning. He came from a well-established political family. He had a very long life, nearly 95 years of age when he died. He's responsible for other aspects. So Griffith is also known as the primary valuation because it was so much linked to Griffith the man. It became known as Griffiths valuation. So our takeaway moments really are, and I found some of the information absolutely fascinating, especially the difficulty of the letters and trying to decipher those. And we did refer to the smaller letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on, where they're together. And that symbolizes the Rundale system of farming, which was a collective type of farming, because many of the families in the west of Ireland farmed together. And it's why the houses aren't in a linear straight line fashion, they're more in a circular fashion and so on. So I just want to thank the team today for such a great show. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Jack, for being the compere. We'll be back next week where we're looking at a comparison between Griffiths valuation and the Tithe allotments and what's happening with land consolidation and so on. So thanks for listening, and we'll try and keep you in the loop.